Mary Oliver poem, well known to most of us, The Summer Day. Who made the world? Who made the swan and the black bear? Who made the grasshopper? This grasshopper, I mean. The one who has flung herself out of the grass, the one who is eating sugar out of my hand, who is moving her jaws back and forth instead of up and down, who is gazing around with her enormous and complicated eyes. Now she lifts her pale forearms and thoroughly washes her face. Now she snaps her wings open and flies away. I don't know exactly what a prayer is. I do know how to pay attention. How to fall down into the grass, how to kneel down in the grass, how to be idle and blessed, how to stroll through the fields, which is what I have been doing all day. Tell me, what else should I have done? Doesn't everything die at last and too soon? Tell me, what is it you plan to do with your one wild and precious life? Digital addictions. The essence of this morning's message was captured by a friend's post on Facebook a couple of days ago. She wrote, "What did we all used to do in the morning first thing before Facebook? Do you remember?" For many of you, I recognize this problem is remote. Some of you may not even own a computer, or if you do own one, it is rarely used. For some of you, a cell phone was urged on you by your concerned children, but you rarely take it anywhere, and certainly have not upgraded it to today's smartphones that allow you to surf the internet. Most of you will do emails, but Facebook, FaceTime, Skype, Twitter, Tumblr, Google+, for many of you these are just names, something someone else does. For you non-users of these social modes of computers, my purpose here is not to make you feel bad or feel smug, but to explore the question of whether these social internet media have taken over the lives of we who do use them to the point you could now call it an addiction. Let me dwell on that word addiction for a moment. It is a strong word. There are many families in this congregation and in this community who have been touched by drug and alcohol addiction. As I've said before from this pulpit, I myself embraced sobriety 9 years ago after concluding that I was an alcoholic. Addiction is not a word I take lightly. But now I have a new habit, and so do some of you. So the question for this morning is whether social internet media, Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, Tumblr, can be addictive for some of us. And what I'm talking about today is the ordinary social use of these media. Posting our own messages, or photos, or videos, viewing the messages, photos, and videos posted by others, and commenting on them, or passing them along. There are important other areas of possible addiction or danger, like video games and texting while driving, that I'm not going to talk about today because I want to concentrate on the daily, ordinary use of social media. Let me give you a few examples. I remember almost 2 years ago when I had a rare visit from my two 30-something children, Sally and Luke, and Luke's girlfriend, Nicola. We spent a good deal of time just sitting around our living room chatting. But everyone who was chatting also had an electronic device open on his or her lap, so that each person could simultaneously take in what was happening in the room and what their friends were saying half a world away. If any random question of fact came up in the conversation, it was instantly Googled and answered. The sayings and doings of the friends of those in the room got woven into our real-time conversation. The thought occurred to me that this was a waste of precious, rare FaceTime. Usually an internet or phone connection is the only way I have to communicate with my children. We then had a few hours together at the cost of some expensive plane tickets. Why did our time together have to be drained by the distraction of the internet? I've heard that many of you have had similar experiences with your children and grandchildren. A couple of days ago, I was in Arlington, a town I used to live in, driving down Massachusetts Avenue, and I saw a boy and girl in their early 20s at a bus stop waiting for the number 77 bus. How romantic, I thought. They're boyfriend and girlfriend, and they're going downtown to spend some quality time together, maybe strolling by the Charles on this beautiful day. They were sitting on the curb and both were laughing, but they weren't talking to each other. They were laughing at the smartphones that they held in their hands. I thought, why aren't they talking to each other? A cartoon in this week's New Yorker takes this one step further. It shows a wedding in which the bride, groom, best man, and maid of honor all have smartphones in their hand. The groom is staring at his. The best man is texting. The maid of honor is smiling at something on hers. And the bride has just looked up and said to the minister, "Huh? Oh yeah, I do." At least the minister did not have an electronic device in his hand. How did we get here? How did we get to the point where we spend huge swatches of our time staring at glowing rectangles? It isn't like it's all recreation. The same computers and tablets and smartphones we use to check out the latest video or game is what we use to work or create art, find the weather forecast, or the traffic. We get embarrassed by how much time we spend on these media, but they are often the lifeline that connects us to our loved ones in remote areas. Speaking for myself, the truth is that my own online life is a very important part of my total life, and it involves me emotionally. I could never have predicted this. I first encountered computers when I took a course in programming in 1971. That time when you said computer, you meant something that occupied an entire room. You would write out your code, you would take it to the window at the university's computing center, and someone would enter it into the computer, run it, and you would get back a few sheets of big paper, tractor-fed paper, with your results, which were all lines of letters and numbers. By the mid-1980s, I had a personal computer on my desk, and I learned to control it with DOS commands, which would type in on the green screen at the blinking cursor. The files had sexy names like AutoExec.dat, and the most exciting thing you could do was find needles in haystacks. If you had told me then that I would get emotionally involved with what took place on a computer, I would have said you were crazy. It was about as emotionally involving as a phone book. But here we are in 2013 with the ability to send free messages to anyone, anywhere in the world, and to post photos and videos without charge to our heart's content almost as soon as they're taken. We see amazing musical and artistic performances brought right to our desktop. This month, you can attend the UUA General Assembly online in your pajamas. You can worship with the 4,000 UUs who will be physically there in Lexington, along with your minister. You can even vote if you want to register as a delegate. The other day, someone posted this arresting thought on Facebook. If you could go back 50 years and tell people what technology had brought us, which fact would be more amazing to folks back in 1963? One, that we can carry devices in our pockets that put us in touch with almost all the knowledge and information we could ever want or need. Or two, that we mostly use these devices to post pictures of cats and get into arguments with people we have never met. But that's the tip of the iceberg. More deeply, we need to ask what it does to our social lives, our spiritual lives, to be emotionally tied to our email, Twitter, text messages, social networking sites. In my own experience, there's a qualitative difference between FaceTime and Facebook, between online and in-person interactions. To better understand this, I went to Google, of course, and that led me to a psychologist named Hilary Cash, who had a therapy practice in the 90s and noticed that a lot of her younger clients had an addiction to video games. So she set up an institute to deal with this and has written a book about video game addiction. In essence, you might say that she has tried to cash in on the subject we're discussing today. In a 2011 online edition of Psychology Today, Dr. Cash espoused the theory of online addiction based on an idea called limbic resonance. The limbic system in the human body is very important in our experience of emotion. It's found in a complex set of brain structures, the thalamus, hypothalamus, and hippocampus. As Dr. Cash uses it, the term limbic resonance, quote, refers to the energetic exchange that happens between two people who are interacting in a caring and safe relationship. Their interaction stimulates the release of certain neurochemicals in the limbic region of the brain. These chemicals are necessary for full emotional and physical well-being. Without enough limbic resonance in our lives over time, we function and feel less and less well. This is why isolation is bad for us. We're social animals. We need one another. As adults, we become depressed and anxious without enough limbic resonance in our lives. As newborns, we may die. If we don't die, we're going to be damaged by this lack. We're not self-contained, self-regulating units. We are regulated through our healthy interactions with those to whom we feel safe and close. Unquote. Dr. Cash goes on to say that, quote, online experience does not appear to stimulate limbic resonance, unquote. In other words, there's a missing element in online communication. And that missing element is very important to the emotional content of the communication. I can remember back in the late 1990s when I was at divinity school and was in a support group of seminarians. One of the members of the group had a job at UUA headquarters, and she had noticed an interesting thing about herself. When she had to communicate with another member of the UUA staff, she would 10 times rather send an email than pick up the phone. Partly, of course, this is a matter of convenience. People aren't always able to answer their phones in a business environment, and an email will let you get your message sent without having to remember to try again to get somebody by phone. But it was more than that. Email is relatively bloodless. You can state only your business and get away with that. If you get the person on the phone, you may need to go through some social niceties and chat a little bit. And in any event, you will be dealing with the fuller range of that person's emotions. In other words, the internet provides a filter. If there's something dicey or difficult about your relation to a person, it might be more comfortable to deal with him or her by email than on the phone or in person. And it is often a lot more efficient. Evolution, my friends, evolution has given most of us the ability to read each other pretty well. When we walk into a gathering, we learn to notice body language, facial expression, smell, tone of voice, to determine who is angry, who is pleased, who is a threat to us, who is a potential ally or a potential mate. We sense all this before the first word is spoken. The nonverbal part of communication is very important in the overall scheme of things. It is this nonverbal part that gets stripped out in online communication. If I'm talking to a group like this congregation, face to face, there's a feedback loop, which tells me how I'm coming across. If I look up and see that some of you are horrified, or disgusted, or amused, I can adjust my presentation accordingly. But if I'm sending out the same words online, I won't know what your reaction is until you send me back a written message. What this occasioned in the early days of email and chat rooms was what was called flame wars, where people made up for the lack of visual contact by using exaggerated rhetoric and calling each other names. We're somewhat wiser now, but I still occasionally have to call down a contributor on Facebook who has exceeded the bounds of courtesy. To get back to Dr. Cash, she sees a link between time spent online and depression. Quote, studies are finding a strong correlation between depression and the amount of time spent online. There is always the question of which came first, but there is good evidence to suggest that time spent in front of the screen can lead to depression in those who were not depressed to begin with. Of course, the computer does get used to cope with depression and other problems, but I want readers to understand that too much screen time can by itself lead to depression, unquote. I feel like she's on to something important here. For all of us who use the internet, particularly social media. Social media vastly expands the range of social contacts. I have Facebook friends from all parts of the globe, and from my earliest childhood friends to my ministry colleagues around the country to musical acquaintances that I made yesterday. And glowing, colorful screens capture your attention because they're designed to do that. That is why we're tempted to check our smartphones in the middle of a meeting. But the online interaction with people, even with photos and videos, does not have the full range of sensory input that an in-person encounter has. We may be led to expect more emotional satisfaction from the medium than it can deliver, and that can lead to depression. In this sense, there is a potential for addiction. It's a strong word, but from my own wrestling with my alcohol addiction, I see one factor which is similar to the online social network. Each offers something that looks like a cure, but actually makes the disease worse. For me, as many alcoholics, it's only after we have finally put down the bottle that we can see that expecting a drink to solve an emotional problem is like trying to put out a fire by pouring gasoline on it. And there's a rough analogy to social networking online. American life has strong trends toward individual satisfactions rather than group endeavors. Sociologist Robert Putnam wrote an influential essay 15 years ago called Bowling Alone, which noted the decline of all kinds of voluntary associations in American life, such as bowling leagues, civic clubs, churches. To me, there are three symbols of this. First, headphones and iPods, which allow you and only you to listen to whatever music you choose. Second, the personal pan pizza, so you don't have to share with anybody. And third, the carpool lanes in the cities, which have only 10% of the traffic because 90% of us drive alone most of the time. Against these trends for social isolation, the social media hold out some promise of connection, and connection on a grand scale, across time and space, as I said earlier. But is it a false promise? If the effect of social networking is actually deepen our depression, then we have the makings of an addiction. An addiction arises when we have something that seems to give comfort, but doesn't, like candy, which actually masks its operation so that we keep taking more in order to bring about happiness. If this first glass of wine made me feel this good, the second glass of wine is going to make me feel twice as good. And yet, this new technology also allows us to connect in ways we never would before. Jacqueline and I were at a dinner party recently with several couples our age. And it became clear shortly into the evening that one of the couples and we were on opposite sides of many fences, political and religious. We got through a pleasant evening, but we were both careful not to introduce subjects that might lead to controversy. At one point, Jacqueline started telling how I had gotten enamored several months ago of an online video of the world distance record flight for hang gliding from South Texas to North Texas, 400-something miles in one day. Amazing video. This led the couple to tell us of their daughter-in-law's recent experience skydiving with her father to mark his 70th birthday. Not only did they have the story to tell, they had the video on that man's iPhone. So at this dinner party, here we were, passing around this iPhone to see this amazing aerial videos taken during the skydive. Now, had we encountered these folks online, we might well have gotten into a squabble over some political or religious issue. In the face-to-face environment of the dinner party, we were able to avoid that danger, and yet when the high technology did come out, it actually served as a bridge. It deepened the social encounter, allowing us to reach across ordinary barriers and show something of our common humanity. In short, the technology itself is neither good nor bad. It is the use we make of it. We can use these marvelous tools to enhance human power and expand our horizons, put ourselves into another person's shoes, and overcome our divisions. Or we can use them to construct an echo chamber and hall of mirrors where the only thing we see and hear is ourselves. We can use it to overcome loneliness or to increase loneliness. And if loneliness is the emotional issue, and it often is, I have a remedy which might sound paradoxical: solitude. One remedy for loneliness is solitude. Not plugging into the internet, but turning off your devices and going outdoors by yourself. Which is why I offered you this familiar Mary Oliver poem a few minutes ago. Let's follow her into the fields on a summer day. I don't know exactly what a prayer is. I do know how to pay attention, how to fall down into the grass, how to kneel down in the grass, how to be idle and blessed, how to stroll through the fields, which is what I've been doing all day. Tell me, what else should I have done? We all have a hunger for connection, but we can connect with nature in a solitary way as well as socially. And we connect with each other in churches, face to face. But the internet, I found, is also an important outreach of my ministry. I get people to read my sermons online, people I know in other parts of life that would never walk into this church for various practical or ideological reasons. In the end, I don't think the problem of social media use by most of us rises to the level of addiction. And I want to emphasize that most of us. It's individual. Well, the number of people that use alcohol and abuse it is only about 10% of the population. So you would expect something like that would have a real serious problem with social media. Social media can be a marvelous tool for deepening and widening our horizons. Overuse of it is just one more thing to worry about if we need something to worry about. Social media are here to stay, though they will undoubtedly continue to evolve. Do you feel guilty because you play too much Scrabble online? Or spend too much time reading about what everyone else is having for dinner? The remedy is simple. Go outside and do absolutely nothing. Instead of checking Facebook first thing in the morning, check your bird feeder. Go out and kneel down in the grass. Spend some face time with that grasshopper, the one who's eating sugar out of my hand, who is moving her jaws back and forth instead of up and down, who is gazing around with her enormous